else was I gonna talk about? Oh yeah. I think when I get to maybe a stopping point, I was gonna do some Eurobro related politics. Shout outs to the Eurobros, my homies. Wanted to talk a little bit about a couple things that I saw. I've kept these tabs open for a while. I just wanted an excuse to like finally make another video segment where I like speak French or something to exercise my language skills, and also cover some news that's particularly relevant to urban life in Europe. You know, because the issues that Europe experiences are similar in their causes, but not quite the same as the issues that America experiences. I guess this kind of rolls into the segment, but one example being the rental crisis. You know, short-term rentals in Europe are a huge thing. Meanwhile, like the rent crisis, the housing crisis in America is characterized by like short-term or not, nobody can fucking afford their rent over here, right? The housing crisis in Europe, while there is some of that happening, what I've seen more so reflected in the papers and such is that the rental markets are being overcrowded with short-term rental companies buying up housing stock and like pushing out individual persons who would be buying a home or renting a home in favor of like basically giving that shit over to like the tourism industry, you know, and it's like hollowing out numerous city centers. I think the most infamous of them being Prague, I think, in the Czech Republic. One of the more infamous examples. Shout outs to anybody who watches Adam Something, you'll know what I'm talking about. Prague has been having a real problem with the short-term rentals and stuff, Airbnb and such. And I guess now would be like as good a time as any to pull up that article I was thinking of, because the other city I was thinking about is god dang it, where is it? Yeah, here we go. À Madrid, la droite déroule le tapis rouge au fond vautour du tourisme. So, to translate, in Madrid, the right rolls out the red carpet to vulture funds of tourism. Basically, vulture capitalists taking over Madrid, and the right wing is helping them do that, or is enabling them. La municipalité de la capitale espagnole a approuvé une nouvelle réglementation permettant de transformer des immeubles entiers en meublés touristiques de type Airbnb. So, the municipality of the capital of Spain has approved a new regulation permitting the transformation of apartment buildings. Entire apartment buildings can now be transformed into Airbnb like tourist buildings. So like you can take an entire apartment block and say, now this is exclusively for short-term rentals, for like Airbnb and shit. Plus de 300 000 foyers madrilènes pourraient être visés, selon la conseillère municipale Sara Ladra, Mas Madrid, gauche, qui dénonce un pillage en règle au détriment des habitants. Entretien. So I will stretch as I'm stretching. I'm going to translate this here. More than 300,000 households, Madrid households, could be affected or will be affected, according to the municipal councilor, or like city councilor, Sara Ladra, who is part of the left-leaning Mas Madrid political party, and denounces a regulatory pillaging to the detriment of the city's inhabitants. And entretien means interview. This is an interview with this local council person. So, let's see. quand on parle de surtourisme en Espagne, les premières villes qui viennent à l'esprit sont Barcelone, Séville ou Valence. Pourtant, ce phénomène touche également la capitale. So when we speak of over tourism or surtourisme, of I don't know what surtourisme translates to. Oh, I got it right the first time. Over tourism. When we speak of over tourism in Spain, the first cities that come to mind are Barcelona, Seville, or Valencia. Now this phenomenon has even reached the capital of Spain. Nous ne remettons pas en cause le fait que le tourisme soit une source très importante d'activité économique et de création d'emplois. So we don't refute the fact that we don't intend to like dispel or discount the fact that tourism is a very important source of economic activity and jobs in Spain, but I think they just refer to it in general. L'ensemble du secteur des services représente 85% du PIB de notre ville. That is an unhealthy amount, I think. The ensemble of this sector of services represents 85% of the GDP of this city. PIB roughly translates to GDP. Just imagine if you like, gross domestic product is like a national metric. The equivalent of that on a city level. That's this. Imagine if you had the GDP just of one city. That's this. I think this actually this literally means GDP. Produit internal brut. The gross internal product. I'm gonna go get a hat. Alright, here we go. Builders League. Cependant, avec plus de 11 millions de touristes par an, nous sommes arrivés à une situation intenable si nous voulons que Madrid reste une ville habitable pour sa population locale. I feel like you kind of get this one without the subtitles, but the sentence saying, however, with more than 11 million tourists per year, we have arrived at a situation, an untenable situation, if Madrid is to stay like habitable for its local population. Like if we want Madrid to be still affordable and like habitable for the people that live there full time. Cette situation de surfréquentation touristique affecte les conditions et la qualité de vie de nos habitants. Il est donc nécessaire de mettre des limites à ce modèle. This situation of over-frequenting in a touristic manner affects the conditions and quality of life of the city's inhabitants. So it's necessary to put limits on this model. I think actually this is I'm probably gonna stop there. I don't want like this is a lot of interview for my not a lot of French speaking skills in the moment, and I think also like for the sake of content, I think I have enough to get a kind of gist of the tone that's being struck here. I actually think that that's a pretty good tone to strike and a pretty good angle to take when analyzing the issue, right? There's a problem of regulatory capture. You know, like these laws are being written specifically to allow short-term rentals to basically take over the city. And so there has to be in kind a institutional pushback. Like you do have to use with the force of law regulatory limits. You have to put legal limits on these short-term rentals. In fact, I would even go as far to say you should just ban the short-term rentals outright from being able to buy those kinds of apartment buildings, you know? The homeowners, they're trying to take over the city, Batman. Yeah, fucking seriously, call Batman. Like, the homeowners are fucking taking over the city. Actually, it's not even that. The Airbnb owns these places. It's like, it's even worse than the model that a lot of beach houses have in the United States. In the United States, there's a sort of housing model for at the beach and other, like, what are considered to be, like, vacation kinds of locations, where there's an on-season and there's an off-season, right? And for the on-season, a lot of the houses and condos and apartments will be up for short-term rental so that people can go take a vacation at the beach. But during the off-season, they're actually owned by somebody. Somebody lives in those houses. They just rent them out for the on-season during the summer months so that people come and vacation there, right? People actually live there. But with Airbnb buying up whole apartment blocks, nobody lives there anymore. That's just for short-term rentals, right? And because it is a like housing asset, because it's like a real estate asset, you don't really need anybody to live there for it to be a profitable investment, right? From the perspective of a business, it'll accrue value regardless of whether somebody is living there or not. So it's just as well to just kind of sit on it. My opinion, I don't think you should be able to own multiple houses. True. You know, you can't live in multiple houses at the same time. Houses need to be, like, decommodified. You need to bring that shit back to a point of strictly use value, right? Like, the moment you introduce exchange value to a fucking house, you're begging for there to be, like, a widespread rent and, like, homelessness crisis, you know? That's how you get, eventually, the shit show in the United States, or the shit show in Europe. Yeah. So I think that this local city councilor, this local city official, is based and correct to point out that, like, you have to ban these short-term rentals from just buying up entire apartment blocks. If you want to rent your house out for the summer while you go live with family or whatever, like, whatever, right? Like, I have problems with renting things and accruing rent as income, whatever. As long as you have money, that's probably still going to be a thing, right? And that's not necessarily so economically detrimental at a large scale as to kill an entire city all at once, right? But buying up an entire stock of housing, an entire apartment block to reserve strictly for short-term rentals, like nobody's even allowed to live there, is pretty fucking bad. Yeah, people need to learn how important like housing is. It's one of those things, without housing, you fucking die. You know how important a home is for your mental health? Yes, I do, in fact. Which is why, it's part of why I say, if you don't have a house, you fucking die. And it's kind of, it's a little bit like death by starvation or otherwise exposure to the elements. It is long and it is painful. You know? Much longer, actually, than starvation. You know? Maybe tax them hard for having so many houses. Yes, I do support that. But also, I really just don't think that short-term rentals should be able to buy up and own places like that. You know? I think that, like, houses are a class of goods that it should be forbidden for, like, legitimately, even under a capitalist framework. I think it is perfectly defensible from a policymaking perspective to say, unless you are a person living in that house or the bank that is, like, transferring the house from one person to another, you are not allowed to own a house. If you're a business, if you are, like, you know, you're one of these real estate fucking companies or whatever, you're not allowed to own that house. You know, you build it, great. You sell it to the bank gives it, sells it to the the homeowners, great. Houses should be the purview of people living in it. It might be like a little bit complicated to do that from a capitalistic perspective, again, because the system of capitalism is biased towards making everything a commodity. One of the reasons that it fucking sucks, and it will eventually lead to that, to that point, right? But there are ways to deal with that. Like, yeah, if you're a business, you're not allowed to own this fucking residential building. you know? Or just have all housing stock be owned by the city, and rent it out for fucking cheap, pennies on the dollar, Because the way that taxes work, taxes are economically top heavy, which means that they are an equalizing force. It compresses the wealth gap of society. If you make houses something that's just completely funded by taxes, society will be more equal, more economically robust and healthy than if you privatize housing, because a privatization model is very bottom heavy. Things that rely on personal finances, very bottom heavy, disproportionately weighs on the least wealthy members of society because they don't have wealth to build up a nest egg, etc., etc. You get the idea, right? All that to say, short-term rentals are dumb and cringe and gay, in parentheses derogatory. And I'm glad that people are actually talking about it in Europe. Although we'll see if anything comes of it, right? It'll exist to make poor people exist in their market form, yeah. But yeah, shoutouts to the Euro Bros. We are all comrades in struggle against the fucking housing crisis. None of us can escape the housing crisis, it seems. In the United States, nobody can fucking afford rent. In Europe, nobody's allowed to rent because it's all owned by Airbnb. So it's like, oh great, rent would be like €1,000 a month, but I'm not allowed to apply for a rental because it's all owned by this fucking short-term rental bullshit. In the United States, sorry, rent is like $3,000 a month. And that's only the middle end. That is not the high end of rents in America. I've seen some New York apartments for $4,000, $5,000. That did not sit well with me. Hell, it's even possible, might have been, overdoing it when I said that, it's possible to address this even within a capitalist framework. Legitimately, I feel like the only way to really fix this, you got to start, properly decommodifying housing. The problems of rent being so expensive in the United States. There's a lot of things that go into that, but fundamentally, they all come back to housing being traded in as something that's a commodity, and so something that has to be kept scarce. Same thing with short-term rentals in Europe. It's for tourism. It's for the tourism business. It's to keep business flowing, to keep the money coming in, right? It is a commodity, it's being further commodified, So and that drives in Europe. That drives Airbnb to gobble up more and more of the housing stock. In America, it means that less and less housing ever gets built, and landlords can just continually increase the rents of the places that they own, particularly the large corporate landlords who are only interested in seeing those dollars at the end of the month and don't really give two shits about the community or the tenants or anything like that, Thanks for watching, and support the channel if you would be so kind.